Welcome back to the podcast of Wednesday's Child. You are with Debbie Watson. I am the founder of Wednesday's Child, a social enterprise helping people recover from eating disorders and deal with that difficult journey that so many of us have lived through or helped someone through. Now, I have a really special guest today, and I know she's special because, well, judging by my mailbag and the number of queries I get about specific things you guys want to talk about, fitness, sport, getting back into exercise is kind of right up there as one of the topics you always want to talk about. Well, this is where my guest comes in, because Trinity Handley is a personal trainer, and she specialises in working with people that are in recovery from or have had a history with eating disorders. So welcome, Trinity.
Good morning. Good morning.
Excuse me, clearing my throat. You can tell we're doing this early morning, can't you? So, Trinity, tell me a little bit about your world. So tell me about kind of personal training and how you got into that world of personal training. So you very specifically are working with people that have concerns about eating disorders, have had a history of eating disorders. There's got to be a reason you did that, right?
Yes, yeah. So well, funnily enough, I actually qualified as a personal trainer when I was 18 and when I was definitely still suffering with an eating disorder. And I kind of chose to do the personal training course in the kind of hope that I would find out the secret to long-term thinness and like
okay
fitness.
I was going to say, now level with me, I was wondering whether you were going to go down the route of saying, oh, I was trying to find the perfect way to heal myself from my eating disorder.
No.
Actually,
no, sadly.
More behaviours that kept me stuck in my eating disorder.
Yeah.
Wow, ladies and gentlemen, like, you heard it here. What an admission.
I know. It did not come from a healthy place at all. And yeah, that kind of it started from a really unhealthy place. And then after a few years I went off to uni. I didn't do anything sports related. I did history, and then I taught in a school for a bit, and it was only at the end of lockdown when I finally felt like I had really come to a really good point in my own recovery, that I thought, hold on a minute, I actually feel really passionate about helping other people find their kind of recovery through sport and exercise, because sport is such an important part of my life, and fitness is such an important part of my life, and for so many people with an eating disorder it is as well, and so removing sport and exercise from your life in order to recover from an eating disorder, I didn't find that was possible, because it was such a central part of my identity that I couldn't work out who I was and who I wanted to be if I wasn't doing sport and fitness. So that's kind of where I am with it now. And I am coaching people, and not everyone that I coach has an eating disorder by any means. But to be fair, the majority of the people that I do work with end up admitting really dodgy relationship with food and like history of not eating disorders, but just, most people that I know have quite an interesting relationship to food, whether or not that's disordered or not. But yeah, I think just the society we live in creates anxieties and preconceptions and myths and things about food and exercise. So I feel like I almost feel like a responsibility to be a voice or an option for people looking for a personal trainer who are also self-aware enough to realize that going to the gym on their own is probably not the best idea, or working with a personal trainer that doesn't know anything about eating disorders is also not the best idea either. So that's kind of where I am, really.
So how has it felt to be doing that as a profession when, in a way, surely you're kind of scratching at the surface of your history and picking over wounds every day that you're dealing with somebody, are you not?
That's a really interesting question. I think at the beginning, I definitely felt like that occasionally. It was especially people that are working with people that are very much in the early stages of recovery. I'm so aware, and I feel, you know, I'm so aware of the fine line of my professional responsibility and where I can't, like, there are times where I would say to someone, look, I can't work with you yet because you shouldn't be exercising, or, you know, you're not coming to me with the right intention. But I don't know whether it's helped my own recovery, because, you know, it is a process. I wouldn't say that I'm fully recovered yet. I am in a completely different place than I was, you know, even a year ago, 2 years ago. I don't really think about it anymore. Like it doesn't affect me on a day-to-day level. So I don't think it does affect me when I'm like picking over old wounds. In fact, it's almost quite liberating for me, because when I do hear things that would have really affected me or triggered me in the past and it doesn't now, I'm like, oh, that's cool.
It's almost a validation that you've come so much further than sometimes you think you have. So
yeah,
the bit that really interests me is you were just saying about sometimes where you do feel compelled to say to someone, you know what, you're just not ready, and for your safety and mine, I don't think we should start personal training right now. Now, it's not just a tick sheet, is it? In just the same way we can't say someone's poorly or not on the basis of their BMI. So how are you going to make that judgment, and how does that work? Because it must be, we know how determined people are when they want to stay sick, yeah? So how do you manage that conversation, and how do you reach that conclusion? Because is part of it born out of knowing what you were very good at doing yourself, which was this: create the imposter facade that says, oh yeah, I'm really committed to recovery. I'm going to do this exercise malarkey because I want to be healthy, but actually I just want to get in bed with the devil.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and I think it definitely is a benefit that I've experienced in eating disorder myself, because I kind of know what to look for, in that I know, like, yeah, I know what I would have struggled with in the past, and I know the excuses that I would have made, and I hear things and it's a red flag for me. I'm like, I've definitely said that in the past, and it did not come from a good place. And I think for me, I would always, the biggest thing for me is honesty with yourself and honesty with the people around you. And if I get an inkling that actually the motivation, it's all about motivation for exercise. It's the motivation, and you can have the best motivation and you're still underweight or overweight in recovery, and you want to do the right thing, and you're really working in recovery and also implementing exercise within that. But if the motivation is wrong, there's no point in doing it. There's literally no point in doing it, and it's not a healthy option. So yeah, I think when I get the sense that someone is not doing it for the right reasons, and I think also I can start telling that when, if I talk about like really low impact movement, and doing strength-based bodyweight exercises that don't involve any cardio, focused on muscle strengthening and posture and things like that, and my clients are like, oh, but can we do something else? Or like, oh, I don't feel like I've really worked. I'm like, well, let's just stop right there. Maybe we need to go back to the beginning and start thinking about motivations again. And
so what you're saying is that you think when a lot of people turn their attention just to aerobic, they're thinking the calorie burn, and they won't see that muscle strengthening as so flipping vital for the maintenance of their healthy body.
Yeah, exactly that.
Okay, so let's talk about you talk, I love that you're talking about motivation and stuff, and we all know how important that is, and Sarah and I talk often on the podcast about how people stay in that kind of ambivalent state. What's key to motivation? What's key to saying, when I wake up today, however hard this is, I'm going to embrace recovery? Because clearly you have done it. you're a personal trainer. You also, I know when I said to you, give yourself a label, give yourself a title, you said, well, I'm a coach, I'm like a motivator, whatever. Be a motivator, be a coach, be outside of personal training. What does it take to get yourself into a recovery transition and to really commit to it? What did it take Trinity to do it? And what do you believe from all the people that you're working with? What does it take?
Oh, that is a big question. That's a big question. And it took, I think, first of all, it took years. It took, like, we're talking years of grappling with all these big questions and trying to figure it out. And it's not an easy, quick process. But I think, oh God, like, I don't know what the motivation is. It's such a hard question. I think there are so many things that are motivators. There are so many little aspects of daily life that are so good when you are not struggling day to day, hour to hour, minute to minute with an eating disorder. And so obviously for me, I love sport and I've always played sport, and I, you know, that's a really big part of like who I am and what I like doing basically with my free time. So the fact that I can get up and have my breakfast because I'm going to go to the gym and it's just a nice experience, like that's part of my routine, and I don't think twice about why, like how many calories I'm going to be burning, and I don't track anything like macros or anything like that as well. Like that's,
you heard it here, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here. She
yeah,
does not track macros. Okay,
and
so
also
on the next level, what about fitness watches? What do you say to people that are slave watches?
Oh my gosh. And guys, I feel that on a very deep level, because I had a Fitbit for a while and then it stopped syncing, so I couldn't use it. So then I only had my like Apple phone, and if you carry it around with you all the time, it tracks your steps. And I don't know how accurate it is, but I would be like, I wouldn't even get up from the sofa to go to the kitchen without carrying my phone, so it would track the like 3 steps.
Oh, please tell me you went that I've got to take my phone to the toilet because it's
I was taking that phone everywhere. Best believe that phone is coming with me everywhere, and it would affect like what outfit I would put on, because I was like, oh, it doesn't have pockets, therefore that's going to be annoying because I'm going to have to carry my, you know, these things, you know, it does get obsessive.
But actually you're right, you know, actually it's really important you share that stuff, because even now in recovery, you know, that sounds like craziness, doesn't it? But actually you and I know that the eating disorder pivots on that day-to-day craziness. We've all been there, we've all done that. And my God, there's plenty of people listening right now who are doing exactly that today. There's a pocket in their dressing gown because they want to be able to carry their iPhone and track their steps.
Literally, it does sound ridiculous, doesn't it? I think I was in quite a bad place and I was running loads, and I was taking my phone out every time, and you know, these things where I was tracking every run on Strava. If I didn't have it on Strava, then it didn't count, like all of these things. And then I got to the point, and again, it was, I think, over lockdown when I realized that it meant absolutely nothing. Like it literally did not mean anything. And I was bending over backwards to please an inanimate object that was ruling my day-to-day life. And no one's seeing how many steps, like it's not a competition with anyone other than myself. No one's seeing it. It doesn't, the 10,000 steps a day thing was plucked out of thin air for a marketing campaign. It doesn't mean anything. I think to get the benefit of the kind of the mental benefit of walking and being active, they recommend it's like 3,000 or 4,000 steps a day is enough. And like there I was like trekking around as many times as I could, like the house, even going up and down the stairs just to get some more steps. I'd be like brushing my teeth in the bathroom and like doing my little steps just trying to get myself up, like
you know, if you're going to lay the table, then you have to go backwards and forwards to the cutlery drawer 17 times, or oh my goodness, I did forget that bit of washing that's still down there in the airing cupboard. I will just go and get that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
In my car, I will just go back for that.
Yeah, no. So I am not a fan at
And
all.
actually, I have to say, it's amazing once you get your rational head on, which obviously takes nutrition and rehabilitation to achieve that.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a lot that I've either read or learned along the way that actually it's rubbish that after a certain amount that actually it doesn't actually benefit your body to do that extra couple of thousand, steps or whatever. It's really not getting you any fitter or, making you lose more weight. It's just it's craziness to it.
No, and it's the mental dependency and the mental. I just got really frustrated with myself that, I think we talk so much about our reliance on technology and screen time and how bad it is for ourselves, our society, our kids and stuff, that we are glued to technology. And I was like, why am I glued to my phone? Okay, yeah, there are apps and things, but on a fundamental reason, I'm glued to my phone because I attribute value to myself when I've reached a certain number of steps, and like in order to do that I have to have my phone on me all the time. And I was like, hold on a minute, this is just ridiculous. And I think coming to that realization and weaning myself off it, and I'm not gonna lie, like I do still regularly check how many steps I've done, but if I've only done like 5,000 steps, I'm not going out on a walk. I'm not going to get up off the sofa. Don't get me wrong. I'm just used to checking, and also
equally not adjusting what you're going to eat for the remainder of the day on the basis.
Oh, absolutely not. No, absolutely not.
Snuggling up on the sofa with my partner now. So what shall I do here? Shall I sacrifice the meal we were about to have? Shall I go out for a 10-mile walk? No, I'm going to rest with that and accept that this is utter nonsense. And I think the bit that you talk about there about you kind of, your value set and we talk about metrics because we talk about number of steps, number of calories, and what your Fitbit says. I think if we all looked at values as being a little bit more qualitative rather than quantitative. So I've said a lot of the time, it's not what with anorexia recovery, it's not what's the matter with you as what matters to you. So kind of if what matters to you is being able to be a partner that's, capable of being present with that person and being a decent lover, or being a daughter that shows up for their parents when they're really needed, or a great mum, or whatever, then measure yourself against that. And I think people like you and I who have been through that journey where everything was about, how many steps, how long was I out, how much further did I run, how much faster did I run, that measurement was at odds with somebody who deep down inside of me wanted to be a nice person. And genuinely, I don't mean that in a trite kind of way. I wanted to live my life right. I would never have broken the law. I wanted to do all the right things. I wanted to be a good sister, a good mother, or not good mother, a good daughter. I wanted to show up. I wanted to be a good friend. But none of those things were possible because the metric I was measuring in my life that felt like it was fundamental was that, piece of digital crap and the nonsense, as you say, that was alluded to in some marketing campaign, that somehow 10,000 steps was the pinnacle of everything and you would be a perfect person if you did that. It was absolutely nonsense. So I would often go to bed at night having thought, well, I've really upset this person. I've broken this person's heart. I've lied about this. I've denied that I have hidden this food or done that or whatever. I felt utterly wretched all day. But you know what? The metric I measure up to is I did my steps. I mean, now in a healthy mindset, that just sounds all kinds of crazy. And I hope somebody out there somewhere will listen to this today and just go, oh yeah, that's me. That's the trap I'm in.
Yeah. And actually values to me was such a pivotal part of figuring out who I was outside of my eating disorder, because when you are in that, you are only concerned about yourself and the eating disorder. It's just impossible to think about other things. And I think for me, one of the biggest turning points was well, something I was really scared of is that I thought that when I gave up my eating disorder, my life would be really empty, and I didn't know who I was, and like, what was I going to do with my day? You know, this is quite scary. It takes up so much time, and it's almost like you're leaving a full-time job with no job to replace it. And I over lockdown, I did loads of reading, and I was living on my own. So it was quite an intense period of time for everyone, I think, but also when you're in recovery from an eating disorder and also you're on your own. But for me, it was a real turning point. And I don't know if you've heard of Brené Brown. She's a
yeah.
Anyway, so if you haven't heard of her, go and check out her. She does this like values quiz. Basically, there's a whole list of values, and you circle the ones that you think you're drawn to specifically, and then you narrow them down until you have 2 core values, or 2 or 3 core values. And it makes sense when you do it, and suddenly you find out, really, you're forced to really reflect on what you actually care about, what's the most important thing to you. And her theory is that when you're living outside of your values, things will not be going well. And it's not eating disorder related, but it will definitely feed into that, because that's our way of coping with things. So when things aren't going well, we turn to the eating disorder, and that makes everything worse. So if you're living outside of your values, it's not, you're never going to feel good. You're never going to feel completely content and happy. So finding out those values and then using them to then shape how you live day to day, and what those motivations are, is super helpful. And actually, it's something that I've done with some of my clients who I think are in the right place to try and think outside the box a little bit, and are ready to break free from their eating disorder, but are still unsure of what that would actually look like and what their new life is going to look like. And yeah, for me, that was really important. So not sports related at all, but
and you're right, her stuff is really powerful. And I think sometimes it's kind of a bit of a rude awakening to do that exercise and to realize, wow, I am so not living my truth, and that can be quite shocking. But again, we can run and hide from that and use the eating disorder to mask that, distress, and eternally live in conflict with ourselves, which only ever leads to, dissatisfaction and unhappiness with life. So then what do? We resort to the eating disorder, or even more, because we're unhappy.
Yeah, for sure. It's so interesting. And I think, especially for me, I'm quite a deep thinker, and I look for meaning and get caught up in big ideas, which I didn't do when I was suffering with an eating disorder, because I just didn't have the capacity to think quite literally at all. So one thing that you mentioned earlier that really stood out to me was that you cannot function unless you are feeding yourself. And I look back now at when I wasn't, and I was a different person. And if you're struggling with, how can I get to this stage in recovery where I'm feeling good and I am, I'm working, I'm moving forward, I'm making progress, the most fundamental thing is food, literally. And it sounds ridiculous and it sounds difficult and scary, but as soon as you start feeding yourself, you will feel like a different person, and you will be a different person, because your brain cannot function. Your brain is shutting down. And it's like, I also find it really helpful to think on a chemical level, because logic goes up.
A scientist on the program. I'm a bit scared.
No, please don't get me wrong.
He's also a crazy professor.
No, I mean, you are giving me titles that I do not deserve. But I think especially with eating disorders, the logical side of your brain gets taken over and squashed down into nothing, and all of this irrational, illogical thought processes come in. And so if you take things back to a really fundamental, like science, we're not talking about like deep science here, because I can't understand that. But we're talking about like just basic the chemical reactions that go on in your brain, and the way your body reacts to starvation, or in a certain way, and it's for survival, and that's important, and that's how our bodies have worked for thousands of years. But to start those processes again, start your brain working in the way that it needs to, you do actually, weirdly enough, need to give it some calories to some energy. So yeah, I mean, like, looking back at when I was like properly ill, I'm literally a different person, and I to the point where I can't even put myself there anymore. Like, it's not me. I look at the behaviors I was doing, and I wouldn't be able to do that now. Because my brain is so much stronger, and like, it would just not cope with, I don't know, I'm not going to say what I was doing, because that could be quite triggering for people, but you can make the picture. I think I think it's so important. And for anyone that's really struggling with how on earth am I going to get better, the truth of the matter is, you won't get better until you give your brain the calories it needs to start working through all the things it needs to work through.
We did a recent episode, and we were talking to someone in the medical profession about, can you do one before the other? So can you do the counselling and the therapy bit before you've really done the nutritional rehabilitation?
No.
Rightly kind of shaking your head, no. You
no.
just can't. And the number of people that come to Wednesday's Child and say that they want help, and they say, I'm being told that I can't get therapy for ages and whatever, but I know I need to get going with therapy because that's what's going to fix me. And if you even dare to have that conversation about how you're doing on kind of trying to make the effort on the nutrition, it's like, oh yeah, but I think I need the counselling before you can't engage, not fully. And in a perfect world, we'd say they'd all run along in tandem, wouldn't they? And everything would have this perfect synergy. But life's not like that. And for our brains to benefit from what we're hearing in the therapy, and for it to penetrate that awful soundtrack that we've allowed to go on for so long, what else are we going to do but give it the sustenance to allow that brain to absorb something? I mean, it's just, you can only describe it as brain starvation. And I think we all underestimate it when we're in our really quite dangerous stages of just staying in a functioning eating disorder way of life. Did you, we're asking this to several people at the minute, did you go down the route of doing kind of all in, or how did you go about it?
As in all in recovery?
Yeah.
I don't even know really what that is. I don't think I did that.
So I guess as opposed to maybe following like a Maudsley diet of your kind of, 3 meals, 3 snacks a day, all in would be a little bit more like, I am just going to have, I'm going to wake up and have a McDonald's for breakfast, and I'm going to eat that like 3 milkshake. Oh, just keep eating until you're full, and just kind of challenge everything.
No, I didn't do that. So I guess there's an element of, well, first of all, I was never underweight, so I never needed to regain weight to be at a healthy weight. I was always, because I think for me, because sports and exercise,
at this point I'm just going to interject with a question mark, whose judgment, what size should you have been? But yes, I get
it. Agreed. But I didn't need to have a certain number of calories a day to try and build up my body. So there was a little bit more flexibility in terms of what I was eating when I was eating and that kind of thing, because I wasn't,
more about behavior suppression and mindset stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And like I wasn't, because of the pandemic, my treatment with the eating disorder services was thrown into disarray, as I'm sure it was for most people. And I went for a long time on my own, literally living on my own. And at first it could have gone very much the wrong way, but I was really lucky. And I actually found it like such a turning point in my recovery. And obviously I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to experience living on their own through a global pandemic to be able to recover from an eating disorder, but also I think it was just the time and the space on my own without any external pressure. And like people weren't, I always felt really stressed about being weighed, and there's a whole conversation we could talk for ever on that subject, but
I have exactly the same issue, that and at the moment we're getting quite heavily involved in training GPs, and as you know, it's the BEAT campaign this year, isn't it, to do more training for GPs, and I can't tell you how many nurse practitioners I had to just say, this is so not helpful. And,
yeah, but also for me it was the eating disorder service. Like it wasn't even the GP that was weighing me, it was the eating disorder services. The team was weighing me, and the fact that then I didn't have that throughout the pandemic because I wasn't going in, and I wasn't seeing anyone either, and I just felt like a lot more just there wasn't any external eyes on me, and I was then able to just take away that external pressure and the expectation of this is my behavior as someone with an eating disorder, this is what I have to do, these are the behaviors that people are expecting from me that I need to do. And I was just in my house on my own, like in control of what I was eating, when I was eating, how I was eating, and I just really kind of fell into a much more natural routine with it all, and I can't really explain it other than it was a really gradual retraining of my brain without those external eyes on me. And obviously for some people you need that accountability, and I was having input from friends and family that did know what was happening and stuff, and it wasn't like I was just doing it on my own by any stretch of the imagination. But for me, I think the recovery process, first of all, it took years, and we're talking like 10-12 years from beginning to where I am today. So it does take time, but I definitely didn't follow a kind of plan or a like the guide. I don't really know about that.
Sounds like you trusted your instinct, and for you it worked. And I think I would say that to anybody, that I can't guarantee for anyone that this route or another is going to work perfectly for you. So sometimes you have to be prepared to fail, but by doing nothing, you're going to fail anyway. So give something a go and realize that isn't going to work for you.
Yeah. And I think also there are some books and things that I really found helpful. And just the kind of concept of intuitive eating that I found really interesting. And just kind of relearning about food and my relationship to it without the external pressure of people and diet culture, and even going to the gym, because we couldn't go to the gym. So again, that was also really helpful, that just period of quiet time to just reflect and relearn and retrain my brain in a really low pressure environment. Obviously the world was crumbling around us, but that didn't seem to faze me in my own personal journey. And
I think it's so important you tell that story, Trinity, because it started to bother me a little bit that the media rhetoric, like during and post-COVID, around eating disorders was that it's all gone to the pot and everybody that's ever had an eating disorder got worse. Because actually what we were hearing at Wednesday's Child was that for some people it took pressure off to such an extent that they were able to find themselves, they were able to change a routine, some of them because they felt forced to, and then naturally it just in the end, more nutrition meant that the brain coped better and then recovery began. But for others, they just said, do you know what, I think I'd been trying to remain in my eating disorder because I felt I'd be a fraud if I ate a bit more.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness, yeah. It's so performative. It's so well, for me it was. And I think that's the other thing, like an eating disorder at the end of the day is a coping mechanism for something. It is your brain coping with something or many things. And so naturally for some people, the pressure that was causing the eating disorder with COVID was taken away, and that was allowing people to heal in a way that probably they didn't, you know, who knows where I'd be now without that period of time. I definitely think that without that I would not be where I am right now. Where I would be, I don't know, but that was really important for me. But then COVID caused so many things, so many issues, and those for some people will compound their need for a coping mechanism, and therefore compound their need for an eating disorder. And ultimately getting recovered from an eating disorder requires you to figure out why you're using it in the first place. It is a coping, although I didn't like that term at first. I'm like, I'm not this isn't a coping mechanism. This is my life. This is me. This is my brain. Like, at the end of the day, it is a coping mechanism. Some people have other coping mechanisms that are equally as bad, or maybe not quite as bad. But
I think it's an appropriate term. I mean, that's the way, you know, some people would say, I like to drink coffee, you know, how can you call coffee a coping mechanism? But actually caffeine is helping people cope by giving them a little bit more energy to sustain their ability to cope.
And I think I remember really vividly one of the eating disorder doctor team people was like, oh, well, you know, it's a coping mechanism. Some people decide that that's, you know, everyone has their own coping. This could be yours. This could be yours for the rest of your life. And I was like, hold on a minute. Hold up right there, because this is not serving me. I don't yeah, maybe at one point it was, for sure, because I got through whatever I was going through, but I don't need it now. I don't want it anymore. I don't want this I want a different coping mechanism. But I think, yeah, so I think she was like, you can have this if you want. Like, everyone has a coping mechanism. This can be yours if you want it. But do you want it?
Ouch.
And I was like, I don't want it. I don't want this.
Have this back.
Yeah, and it was just I think at another point I would have been like, so what are you saying? Are you saying that this is okay? But I do understand where she was coming from, in that it is a biological reaction. It goes really back to that brain chemistry. Your brain is trying to figure out how to survive through something, and whatever it is telling you that this is the way to do it. And so you block out everything else. You dig down into really negative thought processes about food. You control everything in that respect, and your brain has no energy or thought capacity to think about or deal with other things going on in life. Okay, so your brain has shut down to the point where you can't think about it. And so the process of healing is scary, because as your brain does get more energy to think about things, these issues come back up again, and you're like, hold on a minute, this is maybe where it's all come from. But without that period of reflection, and without that nutrition and energy going to your brain, you can't, I'm sorry guys, you can't get through it, really. I'm very aware that we have not done very much talking about sport or fitness.
That's all right. I think, you know, you and I talked off air, didn't we, beforehand, and I said, you know what, I'm sure there's going to be a part 2 to this. So yeah, you're right. I'm very conscious that we're going to wrap this, because it's we've been on the pod for a long time so far, but it's, you know, it's been great chatting to you. I do want to just bring it back to exercise initially, and as I say, we will revisit this again, because I'm sure that lots of people out there are going to have specific questions, and if you do, then send them in, and then we'll arrange and we'll do a part 2 with Trinity. But for this session, Trinity, just for somebody who is, you know, they're kind of deciding whether to be in bed with the devil right now about carrying on with exercise, but knowing they ought to be recovered, or perhaps for a parent or a spouse or partner of someone who constantly is wanting to go out and do the exercise and yet is sort of saying it's vital for their recovery, what would you say? Is it important? And Sarah and I have this debate all the time. Is it vital that actually you just banish the trainers and you stop exercise altogether for however limited a period when you are trying to get to grips with recovery? Or are you going to say, actually, it's very much dependent on the individual? I'd just be really interested in your take on that. And if the truth is, you know, that's very nuanced, well, we'll cover it off next time.
I think it is a really interesting question, because obviously there's the argument on one side that exercise gives you endorphins, and endorphins needs you know, that there's a whole mental element of exercise that it goes beyond the physical, is what I'm saying. But if you cannot exercise for the right reason, so if you're not exercising for the endorphins, if you are going out because you are mitigating your food intake, or you are trying to get to your 100,000 steps, not 100,000, 10,000, there we go, 10,000 steps a day, or for whatever reason you're going out, it has to be the right one. And I can't tell you what that is. Only you can say what that is, and that's something that I have to try and work and figure out with my clients. When I work with someone that's in recovery, it's just as much about reflecting on the exercise as it is about doing the exercise itself. So we always have discussions about the exercise. I always ask the motivations before and after the session. How did that make you feel? What are you feeling right now? What are your thoughts? And it's not as simple as okay, yeah, go ahead and do it, and let's talk about it. It really requires a level of honesty and self-examination that I think some people in recovery won't be ready to do. And there's also the element of like physical health. If you're trying to build back and gain weight, then you've obviously got to factor that in to whatever exercise you're doing. Your bone strength, your muscle strength, you know, there's quite a lot of physical considerations to make as well. And your muscles only mend themselves after exercise in your sleep, really. So if you're not sleeping very well, and if you're not fueling your body, then if you add exercise in on top of that, it's not going to benefit you in the way that you might think it would.
And I can sit here as the perfect example of somebody who never wanted to listen, and who constantly wasn't nourishing themselves enough, and had ever failing bones, and was constantly in and out of A&E with stress fractures here and whatever. And for all my insistence, though, that I've got to do one more day's running, actually ultimately whatever happens is you end up with 6 weeks where you can't do anything other than hobble, or, you know, whatever it is, or long-term damage. So actually, if your ultimate desire is to be able to live a life that is in a healthy way, capable of doing some form of recreational activity and exercise, then you need to do both parts of that. You need to allow that body to heal, to be in the physical strength to go forward, and you need to nourish it. So yeah, you kind of got to get the right base point, haven't you, before you can even allow yourself to think about exercise.
Yeah, and I think, you know, again, like people say, oh, but I want to get stronger and stuff. Do you understand what your body is? Do you understand the physical processes going on in your body right now? Like, when you are in this eating disorder mindset, I think you kind of make up what's going on inside your body. You think you know, because you know what's going on. You're the expert on yourself. But actually, you know, people train for years to understand anatomy and physiology. And I'm not by any means an expert on it at all, but I have an interest in it, and I work with people and I'm interested in bodies because that's what I do. But
don't you think, like, when we get an eating disorder, we sort of develop this level of arrogance that wants to outwit everybody and say, oh no, because I'm the all-seeing, all-knowing, because I've got an eating disorder and I know better than you. I think there's that mindset that develops that somehow, it's kind of it's non-malicious, but it isn't almost an arrogance that somehow
for sure.
None of the rules apply to me. I'm not going to break. I'm going to be different.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of people find motivation in building muscle and I'll gain weight, but as long as it's muscle, and I want to get stronger, but only if it's, not fat. But I think, again, like, most people, because not everyone's interested in physiology and anatomy and stuff, but when you exercise, what your muscles are doing is tearing. They tear, they damage themselves, and the process of building muscle is where those microscopic tears in your muscles mend. It makes the fibers get stronger. So the exercise process is actually damaging muscle. You're damaging muscle, and it's only in the recovery process, in the recovery, in the sleep, in your nutrition, that muscle then gets stronger and you then build muscle. But if you it kind of takes about 48 hours for these muscle repairs to heal. So that's why the biggest blokes in the gym are not training every day. They are training every other day, or they're training legs one day, upper body the next day. You can't train 2 days in a row the same muscles and expect to get the results that you're looking for. And such a big element of that recovery process is nutrition, obviously. And these people that are training, but like bodybuilders, they're eating like 4,000, 5,000 calories a day. So that's another thing. Like, if you think you're about to get hench, you're not. I'm sorry. It's not. I wish it was easy. All these muscle people in people in the gym, they're not, there's quite a lot of work that goes into gaining weight, and it's not going to happen overnight. Don't worry about that. But
Trinity,
yeah, I think,
I'm going to bring this to an end, because I can feel that you and I could talk forever, and we are definitely going to have to do another episode. So look, if we've sparked something where any of you out there have got more questions for Trinity about the exercise, we're really hoping we can do some more work with Trinity and have her as part of our Wednesday's Child crew, so that when it comes to exercise and sport, there's more that we can aid you with, because we know it's such a big deal. And for all the humour that we're applying to today's episode, we know darn well that it's a real torturous dilemma for so many of you. So we really aren't underestimating that. We just want you all to embrace any kind of movement, sport, exercise, whatever, any kind of commitment to do something with your body. We're asking you to do it in a way that is both healthy for restoration and healthy for that kind of future journey, that allows you to have the values that you want to have and the life that you want to have in the future, rather than that being that crippled wreck of a person that overdid it and wasn't really ready to. So if we can help you with that understanding along the way, then we sure will try and apply that, won't we?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed talking about all of these things. Sorry if you were expecting more about exercise and sport, but we got kind of waylaid with other interesting avenues of conversation. But yeah, thank you so much for having me.
No, you're more than welcome, and it'd be great to have you again on another episode. So really looking forward to that. Thanks, Trinity. That's it for another episode from Wednesday's Child. We will see you all again soon. Don't forget to leave your comments at the end of the show. I'm also going to share some of the book titles and different recommendations that Trinity had. I'm going to put those in the show notes at the bottom. But also email us if you want to put a question into a future episode that we'll do a Q&A with Trinity. You can email hello@wednesdayschechild.co.uk. Thanks everyone for listening.